The snow stretched as far as the eye could see, white and endless. Covering the world in a silent, cold blanket, the wind howled across the open plain, carrying sharp flakes that stung the skin like tiny blades. Each step in the snow was heavy, each breath a struggle in the freezing air. In the middle of this vast emptiness, a tiny figure moved slowly. Her feet sank deep into the powdery snow, leaving small prints that were quickly swallowed by the wind. She was not human. Her skin had a faint silver tone that shimmered under the weak sunlight, and her eyes were a strange, beautiful shade of violet. She wore nothing more than a thin, torn dress that clung to her thin frame and around her shoulders. A ragged piece of cloth flapped in the wind. The girl's breaths came in short bursts. Her small hands, with 4 delicate fingers, clutched the cloth tightly. Her lips trembled, and her bare toes were turning pale blue from the cold. She was no older than 5 or 6 in human years. Yet she had no one with her, no family, no friends, no shelter. The snow crunched softly behind her. She froze, her heart racing slowly. She turned her head, and her violet eyes widened. In the distance, shadows moved in the storm. Their shapes were low to the ground, but large, with powerful muscles shifting under thick white fur. Then she saw their eyes, glowing. Bright yellow, unblinking snow lions. There were 3 at first, walking with calm, patient steps. Their heads were low, their long tails swaying from side to side. Each step brought them closer, and the girl could see their massive paws pressing into the snow. They didn't rush. They didn't need to. She was small, weak, and slow. They knew it was only a matter of time. The girl turned and stumbled forward, trying to run, but the snow was deep, and her legs were shaking. Each step felt heavier than the last. The cold air burned in her lungs. She could hear them behind her, the soft, steady crunch of paws on snow, the deep rumble of their throats, the sound of their breathing. One of the lions let out a low growl, and the sound went straight through her bones. She didn't dare look back. Her eyes searched the white horizon for anything, any rock, any tree, any shelter. But there was nothing. Only more snow and more wind. Her foot caught on something under the snow, and she fell forward. Her hands sank into the icy powder. Her teeth chattered as she pushed herself up, but it was too late. The shadows were closer now. The largest lion was almost upon her, its head lowering, muscles tensing for the final leap. Her breath came fast and shallow. Her body refused to move. Her mind screamed at her to run, but her legs felt like frozen stone. She could smell the lions now, the sharp, wild scent mixed with the cold. She closed her eyes, waiting for the pain. And then another sound cut through the storm, heavy. Footsteps. They were slow but powerful, crunching into the snow with weight and purpose. The girl's eyes snapped open, and she turned her head. A tall figure emerged from the swirling snow. His shape was broad, his movements steady. He was covered in thick winter armor, a dark cloak whipping behind him in the wind. The armor gleamed faintly, the edges worn, but strong. Across his back, a long weapon rested, and in his hand, a blade hummed with a soft blue glow. The snow lions stopped, their glowing eyes shifting to the new arrival. They snarled low in their throats, tails twitching. The man didn't flinch. He took one step forward, placing himself between the girl and the predators. "Stay behind me," he said, his voice deep and calm. The girl stared at him. Not knowing whether to trust him, she had never seen a human before. Only heard stories. Some called them monsters. Others said they were protectors, but she had no time to decide. One of the lions moved first, stepping closer, its huge paws barely making a sound. Its muscles rippled under its fur, its jaws parting to reveal long, sharp fangs. The man shifted his stance, lifting the glowing blade. The light reflected in the falling snow, casting strange shadows on the white ground. The lion growled louder, ears flat, tail lashing from side to side. The girl clutched the torn cloth around her shoulders and pressed herself into the snow. Her violet eyes never left the man's back. The air felt charged. The wind seemed to pause for a heartbeat. Then the lion leaped. The stranger with the blade. The snow lion flew through the air, claws outstretched, fangs glistening. In the pale light, the man moved faster than the girl thought possible. His arms swung, and the glowing blade cut through the storm. A flash of blue light lit the snow, and the lion's roar turned into a sharp, painful cry before it crashed into the ground. The other two lions froze for a heartbeat, their glowing eyes locked on the man, their tails lashing. They had hunted many creatures in the wild. But this prey was different. This one fought back. The man's boots crunched as he stepped forward. His blade hummed in the cold air. He didn't look at the girl, but his voice carried over the wind, firm and steady. Stay close. Don't run. The girl's heart pounded. She didn't know him. Didn't even know if humans could be trusted. But she knew one thing: the lions were far more dangerous. She took a shaky step toward him, her small hands gripping the edge of his cloak. The lions began to spread out, circling them. Their bodies moved like ghosts in the storm. Their yellow eyes glowed from different angles. The man turned slowly, keeping them all in sight. One lion let out a deep growl and charged from the left. Snow sprayed in every direction as it came. The man pivoted, blade slicing low. The sound of metal meeting flesh was quick, almost too quick to hear. The beast skidded to the side, bleeding into the snow. The last lion hesitated. Its ears flicked. Its tail slowed. The man's eyes narrowed. He didn't attack, he simply took one slow step forward. His presence alone made the predator take a step back. The storm hissed around them, flakes drifting between the man and the beast, and then, with a final snarl, the lion turned and vanished. Into the white, the girl was shaking, not from the cold this time, but from the shock. She stared at the man's back, wondering who he was. Why had he saved her? He finally turned, his face partly hidden behind a frost-covered visor. His breath fogged the air. He studied her for a long moment before speaking. "You can walk." She nodded quickly, though her legs still trembled. "Good," he said. Turning toward the endless white. "We're not safe here." Without waiting, he began to walk. His boots sank into the snow with steady, strong steps. The girl hesitated for only a second before following. Each step felt like a choice: stay in the cold with danger behind, or follow the stranger who had just fought off death itself. Somewhere deep inside, she knew. She didn't have any other choice. Flight through the blizzard, the wind grew sharper as they moved. The storm no longer whispered, screamed, flinging ice and snow into their faces. The girl's tiny feet sank deep into the drifts, and each step felt heavier than the last. The man slowed his pace just enough for her to keep up. But his head never stopped turning, scanning the white emptiness around them. Behind them, the snow was no longer empty. Shadows flickered in the swirling frost shapes, moving, low and silent. The snow lions hadn't given up. They were following, their glowing eyes sometimes visible in the storm before vanishing again. Predators waiting for the right moment. Stay close. The man's voice cut through the wind. The girl gripped the corner of his cloak, her small hand numb from the cold. Her teeth chattered as she tried to speak, but her words came out in broken whispers. They won't stop. They'll stop," he said without looking back, "or they'll die." The storm thickened until the world turned into a moving wall of white. Snow whipped at their faces and filled the air so heavily that the girl could barely see the man's boots in front of her. Still, he moved forward with the steady confidence of someone who knew where he was going. Through the haze, something dark appeared ahead, a jagged shadow against the flat white horizon. As they came closer, the girls saw it was a half-buried structure. Metal walls bent and frozen in place. An old human outpost. Its roof sagged under the weight of years of snow. And icicles as long as her arm hung from the entrance. The man moved to the door and slammed his armored shoulder against it. It groaned, then cracked open. Sending a cloud of snow inside, he stepped in first. Scanning the shadows, then motioned for her to follow. The air inside was still and heavy. The floor was covered in a thin sheet of ice, and the walls were lined with broken screens and rusted tools. She stepped in, her small breaths echoing in the silence. For the first time in hours, she thought she might be safe. Then she heard it. A sound from the trees outside, low, deep, and hungry. The man's head turned sharply toward the door through the narrow gap. She saw them, 3 pairs of glowing yellow eyes moving closer. The lions had tracked them all the way here. The man's blade hummed to life again. He didn't look at her when he said, "Find somewhere to hide." Now, her heart pounded as she slipped behind a stack of broken crates. Through a small gap between them, she watched as the first lion stepped into the doorway, snow clinging to its fur. It lowered its head, growling, its hot breath steaming. In the cold air, the man didn't move an inch. The storm howled outside, but inside, the only sound was the low rumble of the beast and the faint hum of the blade in the human's hand. The fight wasn't over. It had only just begun. The last stand, the first lion stepped fully into the outpost, its huge paws silent on the icy floor. Snow clung to its mane, and its breath came in heavy clouds. Its glowing yellow eyes locked onto the human standing in the center of the room. The man didn't move, didn't speak. He simply shifted his weight, blade ready, from outside. 2 more lions appeared in the doorway, their shapes framed against the swirling white storm, their tails lashed side to side, muscles rippling under their thick fur. The girl crouched behind the crates, her small fingers pressed over her mouth to keep from making a sound. Her wide violet eyes darted between the man and the predators. The first lion growled low, a deep sound that vibrated through the metal walls. The man's visor hid his eyes, but the way he tilted his head made it clear he was measuring them. The storm outside roared, shaking loose snow from the roof. The lions advanced, slow and deliberate, fangs glistening under the dim light. Then, without warning, the first lion lunged. The man moved like lightning, sidestepping with perfect precision. His glowing blade slashed through the air, leaving a streak of blue light. The sound of impact was sharp and wet. The beast stumbled, roaring in pain, and collapsed on the frozen floor. The second lion pounced before the first hit the ground. Its claws scraped the man's shoulder plate. Sparks flying, he twisted, forcing his blade upward, striking deep under its jaw. The animal's roar turned into a choking gasp before it fell heavily, shaking the floor. The third lion froze, its ears twitching. It looked from its fallen packmates to the human, then back to the open storm outside. For a long moment, the two faced each other, predator and predator. The girl's heart pounded so loudly she could barely hear the wind anymore. The man took one slow, heavy step toward it, his boots cracking the ice underfoot. The lion let out a single warning snarl. But it didn't attack. Instead, it backed away, step by step, until its shadow vanished into the snowstorm. Silence fell. The hum of the blade faded as the man lowered his weapon. Steam rose from the fallen beasts, their blood a dark stain on the pale ice. The girl didn't move until the man's voice broke. The quiet, "It's over," he said, but his tone carried no relief, only caution. She crawled out from behind the crates, her small feet slipping on the icy floor for the first time. She stepped close enough to see his face under the visor. Faint scar along his cheek, eyes sharp but not unkind. You saved me," she whispered, her voice shaking. He looked at her for a long moment before replying, "You're still breathing." "That's enough for now." Outside, the storm howled again, as if reminding them the world beyond these walls was still dangerous, and deep in the snow, other shadows were already moving. A shelter in the cold, the man dragged the fallen lions toward the open doorway, their massive bodies leaving dark streaks across the ice. He heaved them outside into the storm, letting the snow quickly swallow their shapes. When he came back in, he slammed the door shut and wedged a broken metal beam against it. The outpost fell into an uneasy silence, broken only by the sound of their breathing. The girl stood near the center of the room, her bare feet curling against the frozen floor. She hugged the ragged cloth tighter around her shoulders. Her violet eyes followed the man's every movement. Part of her wanted to speak, to ask who he was, where he came from, but the words stayed trapped in her throat. He moved with purpose, searching the shadowed corners of the building. When he found a collapsed cabinet, he pried it open and pulled out a small, dented heating unit. It looked dead, but he set it down and began working. The faint whir of tools, the click of metal against metal, and then a sudden hiss as warm air began to spill into the cold room. The girl stepped closer, holding her hands over the vent. The warmth spread across her frozen skin, sending a shiver through her small frame. The man reached into a pouch and tossed her a small ration pack. It was hard and dry, but she tore it open and ate like she hadn't tasted food in days. When she was halfway through, she looked up and whispered, "Why did you help me?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he sat down on a broken crate, resting the glowing blade across his knees. Finally, he said, "Because you are still fighting to stay alive." Her gaze dropped to the floor. "My village. They said I was too small, too weak," she said quietly. "They left me in the snow." Her voice cracked on the last word, but she kept eating. The man didn't speak, but his jaw tightened under his visor. Outside, the wind screamed against the metal walls. The heating unit hummed steadily, but it could not warm the fear in the room. The girl's eyes drifted to the dark corners. Half expecting those glowing yellow eyes to return, the man noticed and said, "They won't come back tonight," but his tone carried no comfort. It sounded more like a promise he was willing to fight to keep. The storm raged on, sealing them deeper into the frozen wasteland. And for the first time since she had been left in the snow, the girl felt something she had almost forgotten: not safety. Not yet, but the faintest spark of hope. Shadows in the snow. Night fell slowly. The storm outside calmed, but the silence that followed felt heavier. The man sat near the heating unit, his armor faintly glinting in the dim light. The girl huddled in a corner, wrapped in an old blanket he had found in a storage bin. She was warm now, but her eyes stayed wide, alert, as if she knew the cold wasn't the only thing trying to kill her. Then it came, a sound, faint at first, like soft crunches in the snow. Not the heavy, padded steps of lions. These were sharper, deliberate, too even to be animals. The man's head lifted. His hand slid to the hilt of his blade, through a crack in the wall. He looked out into the pale moonlight. Figures moved between the trees, tall, thin, wrapped in white armor that blended perfectly with the snow. They carried long rifles across their backs and strange hooked blades at their sides. Their helmets had smooth, glassy visors that reflected the moon. They moved in perfect lines, silent, dangerous. The girl saw them too. Her breath caught, and her hands trembled as she whispered, "They're hunters." Her voice was so low it was almost lost in the hum of the heater. "They came for me before." The man's visor turned toward her. His voice was calm, but his words were heavy. "They were after you." "Why?" She shook her head quickly. "I don't know. But they killed anyone who tried to hide me." Outside, the figures spread out, surrounding the outpost. The crunch of their boots on snow grew louder. One raised a hand, signaling the others. To stop, they were close now, close enough that the man could see the frost on their armor. The girl's voice shook. "If they find me, they won't just kill me. They'll take me first." The man stood slowly, his blade humming to life. "Then they won't find you," he said. His voice wasn't loud, but it carried the weight of a promise carved in stone. The first hunter stepped forward, his visor reflecting the weak moonlight. The storm was gone now, but the real danger had arrived, and unlike the lions, these enemies thought, planned, and killed for reasons far darker than hunger. The morning sun, the outpost, was silent except for the low hum of the heater. But outside, the snow crunched under steady, careful steps. The hunters moved like shadows in the moonlight, their white armor blending perfectly with the frozen forest. Through the small crack in the wall, the man could see at least 6 of them. Spreading out, closing in, they weren't in a rush. They were confident. Hunters like these never chased, they cornered. The girl pressed herself deeper behind the crates, her violet eyes fixed on the man's back. Her small hands trembled as she clutched the blanket he had given her. Her heart was beating so fast she thought it might give her away. She had seen these hunters before, seen what they did to people who got in their way. No one survived, not for long. The man's blade was already in his hand, the soft blue glow casting sharp shadows across the walls. His stance was calm, but every line of his body was ready for violence. He turned his head slightly toward her, his voice low but clear. "When I move, don't come out. No matter what you hear." She opened her mouth to protest. He cut her off without looking at her. "Promise me." She hesitated, then nodded. "I promise." A shadow fell across the doorway. The first hunter appeared, stepping inside with slow, precise movements. His visor reflected the pale light from the heater. His weapon held low but ready. Behind him, another entered. They spoke in a language the girl didn't understand, short bursts of sound through their helmets. The man didn't wait to translate. He moved. 1 second, he was standing still. The next, he was across the room. The blade sang through the air. A flash of blue cutting through the dim light. The first hunter fell before he could raise his weapon. The second lunged forward, swinging his hooked blade. Metal clashed with energy, sparks lighting the dark as the man caught the strike and twisted. The hunter hit the wall hard, the sound echoing through the outpost. Outside, the rest of the hunters reacted instantly. Boots pounded on the snow. Voices barked through comms. 3 more appeared in the doorway. Rifle snapping up, the man dropped low, rolling across the icy floor. A burst of energy fire tore through the wall where his head had been. He came up in a crouch, swinging his blade in a tight arc. 1 rifle split in half, the wielder stumbling back before the blade found the gap in his armor. Another hunter charged in, but the man kicked the body of his fallen comrade into him, sending them both crashing into the wall. The third fired again, bolts of burning light shattering an old console near the girl's hiding place. The heat from the shot stung her skin, and she bit her lip to stop from crying out. The man was moving again, never staying in one spot. The air was filled with the sharp hum of his blade, the thud of bodies hitting the floor, the muffled shouts of the hunters outside. Snow swirled in through the open door. As more tried to push in, he didn't let them. Every step they took forward was met with steel and speed. One broke past him, spotting the girl, her breath caught in her throat. The hunter reached for her, and then the man was there, grabbing the hunter by the collar and yanking him backward so hard his feet left the floor. The blade flashed once, and the hunter went still. The girl's eyes filled with tears, not from fear this time, from something else. Something she couldn't name. The fight lasted minutes. It felt like hours, and then, as suddenly as it began, it was over. The outpost was littered with still forms. The wind howled through the open doorway again, carrying with it the faint scent of blood and metal. The man stood in the center of the room, breathing hard, his armor dented and scratched. Steam rose from the blade as it dimmed and powered down. He looked toward the girl. "You hurt." She shook her head slowly. Her voice was small. "No." "But you, I've had worse," he said simply. He looked toward the door, scanning the tree line. "They won't come back. Not now." The girl stepped out from behind the crates, her bare feet silent on the ice. She stopped a few steps away from him. Unsure if she was allowed to get closer, he noticed and gave a short nod. It was permission enough. She crossed the gap and stood beside him, looking out at the snow-covered world beyond. The storm had passed. The sky was turning from black to a deep, pale blue. The first light of morning spilled across the snow, turning it into a glittering sea. It was quiet now, the kind of quiet that made you feel the world was holding its breath. "What happens now?" she asked softly. The man didn't answer right away. He stepped outside, his boots crunching in the fresh snow. She followed, the cold air biting at her cheeks. But somehow it didn't feel as sharp as before. "We walk," he said at last, "until we find somewhere they can't reach you." She frowned. "And you? Where will you go after that?" He glanced down at her. "I'll still be there." Her lips parted in surprise. She hadn't expected that answer. The wind caught her hair, lifting it like strands of silver in the morning light. She tried to look away so he wouldn't see the tears in her eyes, but it was too late. They walked, leaving deep tracks in the untouched snow. The outpost grew smaller behind them until it was nothing more than a shadow in the white distance. The sun climbed higher, casting long, warm rays across the frozen land. The girl's small hand found his. He didn't pull away. In fact, his grip tightened just slightly. For the first time since she had been left in the snow, she felt safe. Not because the world was less dangerous, but because she was no longer facing it alone, somewhere behind them. The hunters' bodies were already being covered by fresh snow. The lions had long since vanished into the deeper forest. The land was quiet again, but the man knew the peace wouldn't last forever. Still, he kept walking, because for now, the sun was rising, and the tiny alien child beside him had survived another night. That was enough reason to keep going.